put that on, and hopefully you can see me as well now.
Yes, there you are. Okay, super.
Right, good morning, Paul. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for the intro, Paul. And I'd love to be back. I think it was only a couple of months ago I was here, so it's nice to be back on a Thursday morning. Slightly different topic this time, I guess. So this time we're going to talk about artificial intelligence, AI, which is a kind of a big hot topic. And I think I titled it "Should I Be Excited or Afraid?" And I think that's probably true of most people at the moment. Most people who I speak to, either more widely or within the sector, is either one of the two, or maybe a little bit of both. And I think it's a massively interesting topic. So we'll try and unpack some of those bits today, and we'll look a bit about it. Sort of in the next 30-40 minutes, however long it is, we managed to stretch this out. We could talk about this all day. We could talk about it probably all week. It's such a sort of deep subject, but I think a few things really wanting to cover today. Defining it, because there's a lot of slightly different definitions around there of AI, and it's one of those things where you can go down a rabbit hole with it. So we're going to sort of look at that and look at sort of a definition and different types, and we'll unpack some of the different types a little bit. Not going to go too techy, too deep into them, just to explain a little bit about sort of what they are and some of the things that you probably know and you've used and you may have experimented with, but what exactly are they in the context of this whole definition of this umbrella term of AI. And then we'll look at it from our perspective, from a sort of construction sector point of view as well, and look at some of the applications, some of the things that are being done at the moment. I'll put the importance of the prompt. We'll look at that, and we'll pick that up a little bit later on. So we'll talk about things called prompts, and then some of the things to think about as we move forward. The genie's out of the bottle with this. It's not going to go away, and so there's some things that we need to think about. And I think in the intro, this sort of short paragraph, the government, there's legislation going through, the strategy's being written for it. People are kind of a little bit nervous about it as well. So there's things, I guess, for us to consider as we sort of go forward. To start it off, I think there is this is a thing. AI anxiety is a thing. It's published. It's out there, and a lot of people are feeling it, and a lot of the anxiety around it is not knowing how to use it and not knowing sort of what it is really. And then there's real sort of concern around legal implications, ethical implications of it, whether it will cause us more security breaches, whether it's safe. Those sort of issues a lot of people are asking, a lot of people are getting sort of anxious about. The age-old sort of concern around it, which we heard 13 years ago when the whole BIM revolution, if we want to call it that, was happening. Will it take my job? Will it do me out of a job? Will I not be needed because AI will take over? So there's concern around that. If I don't use it, will I get left behind? Will other people overtake me? There's all those. And I think generally the underlying issue is the speed. It is incredible development speed that's going on, and certainly I know from my personal perspective, I'm sure there's probably many people on the call. You go on to LinkedIn if you're on there with your social media posts, and every day when I sort of log in the morning, there's something new with AI happening, something new. And I know from my point of view, I look at that and I can't keep up. I need to read more. I can't keep up. And it's that speed of development, which is exponential. At worst, but you feel like you can't keep up with it. You can't know enough. So I think that's generating some level of anxiety as well. That where's it going to go? Where's it going to go? What's going to happen today? It literally is kind of on a daily. It's almost like on a daily basis. So if you're feeling any of those, it's quite normal. That's generally what a lot of people are feeling at the moment. So I think let's take some comfort from that, knowing that it is actually a thing. If we go back a little bit, it's not new. You can see that timeline on there, that the whole concept of sort of AI isn't, it's not a new thing. You can date it back to people thinking about automatic computers, and sort of come right through to the 90s, the 80s, 70s, 80s, 90s, and times like that. So it's not, you can go back to Turing. It's not a new thing, but it's now got sort of real attention. We're getting really excited by it. If we wanted to look back to really where the terminology, I guess, came from, if we go back to one of the summer workshops in Dartmouth in '56, a group of sort of computer scientists got together there, and they started to define what artificial intelligence in a computer might be. And it was, you look at some of the definitions, and it was a way to get computers to think and perform how we do, or a way that a computer can solve problems like we do. And the AI is developed from that. And it's evolved in different ways. And I think back, I remember in my master's course in the 90s, and we did some sort of computing, and we were talking about expert systems. And expert systems then were very much logic driven, based on programs. So there was sort of an if then else. So it was very binary. If this happens, then do this. Else, if that doesn't happen, do this. So it was either one or the other. And then, kind of fast forward a little bit, and when I was writing my PhD, and one of my friends who was writing his at the same time, he was doing some work on what we call fuzzy logic, and he was using it for site layout and site logistics problems. And fuzzy logic kind of evolved that on a bit more, because it wasn't yes and no, it was degrees of maybe. So instead of a binary solution, a 1 or a 0, a yes or a no, it was a maybe, kind of, highly probable yes. So you had this grey area in it, and that's the sort of fundamental of fuzzy logic, which again is kind of a type there, or a sort of part of AI. So we're looking at that in the sort of 2000s. We use that, and things have kept on going, and things have kept on developing. Where things kind of kicked off and really got, I guess, the world's attention and the general public's attention, was we go into kind of November, back to November 22. A little bit before that, for those of us who were maybe following this and seeing where things were going, but it really kicked off when November 22 we launched ChatGPT came out, and you can see some of the statistics on there. Before that, we've been having some conversations about it in the sort of research groups I'm in, but at that point, it was unlocked. It went out there for the public, and you can see the big one for me is how long it took to hit 1 million users. And if you look at that one on the side over on the green bars over there, that gives you an indication of the speed of it. It took 5 days to hit 1 million users. Now there's lots of other variables in that. More people online, more people accessible to technology than maybe there was in, if you look back at Twitter in 2006 or even Instagram in 2010. But the speed of it was just incredible. It took off fast. Along with that, you get the usual negative press, if we want. So you can see some of the tabloids there that were picking up on it and going on like this thing's it's almost Terminator-esque. For those of you who remember the Terminator movies, the New York Times ran a piece where they had a conversation with it. It was talking about wanting to take over. So there was, it started to generate mainstream media attention as well. And we need to put all that in the context of anything technological in terms of developments, anything kind of technological development. And you have the standard curve, which is the trigger, where we think it's going to solve everything and do everything for us. Then we kind of get a bit fed up with it, and we realize it's not really going to do anything. The trough of disillusionment. Then we go up the slope, and we start to use it, and it becomes the sort of what we call the plateau of productivity. And you can trace that. You can trace that through the sort of the CAD, the BIM workflows, and we can even trace that through the AI. I guess the fun thing is trying to figure out where we are on that. Are we still somewhere up here, or are we moving down to this bit? I don't think we're certainly anywhere over here yet, but it's kind of fun to think where are we. So that's a normal technology kind of adoption thing. So let's put a few definitions on this stuff. Artificial intelligence really is an umbrella term. So it's a term that can describe a lot of the different technologies and a lot of the different workflows and models and tools that are out there. But essentially, they are digital programs that can behave, learn, and reason like we do, like humans. There are subsets within that. So one of the subsets that we use a lot, if we don't know we're using it a lot, is machine learning. So that is where we have tools, sorts of technologies that have the ability to learn without specifically having that learning initially programmed into them. So they, it's getting a bit more humanistic, like how we learn. We're not born with all the knowledge. We have to learn that knowledge. We have to develop it. And then within machine learning, we have a subset of that, which is deep learning, which starts to talk about ANNs or artificial neural networks. And they can handle vast amounts of data, and they start to think a little bit more like our brain. And they start to reason between different layers. We'll talk about those in a minute. So there's these subsets. So we all say AI, and everybody does that. Everybody uses it. But actually, it's an umbrella term. And I guess we can think of that like, almost like BIM. We say BIM, but BIM's quite an umbrella term about the process, and we can then come down into that and distill that down. To try and make that sort of a little bit, I guess, simpler, it's something you could talk hours about. But in terms of machine learning, there is some input, and we train that, and we help the system to learn by extracting features, and there's a human input in that. So we have this thing called a simple neural network. And when we say neural network, they're designed because we say neural because they're designed to mimic what's happening in the brain, where we have sort of neurons firing in the human brain, and each little tiny part of the brain does its own little piece of work and then shoots the message out to another part of the brain, which then does another piece of work on it and shoots it around. That's how it works. So these things are trying to mirror that brain function that we've got. But in kind of in a simple neural net, we've got what we call feature extraction, and we help the computer to learn things. And some examples of that we've all done, everybody's done. We maybe didn't know we've been doing it, but for a good few years now, we've been using the capture technology. When you go to sign into something, or you make a payment online, and you do that capture, and it puts a grid up of squares, and it says, select everything that contains a car, or select everything that contains a traffic light or a road sign. Yes, that's helping sort of select that you're a human and you can make that reasoning judgment, but that's also you're helping to train Google's or there's AI in the background. So you're helping with that feature extraction. You're saying this thing here is a road sign. So that's sort of supervised learning, and then we get more unsupervised learning, where it looks for patterns in things, and then you get into some more around that thing of face recognition. But we're teaching the network how to do things, like how we teach a child. We teach a child that is something. That is something. That's an object. That's a car. That's a bike. So we're doing that, and then they get the output. So it learns. It starts to learn. Then, when we get into more deep learning, it starts to then learn for itself. So it starts to extract features itself, and then classify them, and then sort of go in this loop and learn for itself. And that uses a deeper neural network. So there's more neurons firing. It's passing more information around. Similar thing, but it starts to automatically classify things and extract them. And we're seeing that now a lot in things like semantic segmentation of point clouds is one. If we do in the last session, I talked about sort of point clouds and measurements. We're seeing that where we're breaking up point clouds. So we're seeing it there. We've seen it in sort of more recognition of 3D objects, images, so that we're getting more into that. And we're also, the big one is where we're using it into natural language processing. We'll talk about that in a minute, but that is the fundamental sort of underpinning of a lot of AI that's going on at the moment. Natural language processing is sort of a branch of deep learning and a branch of AI. And we've been using it for a long time. We just didn't probably know we've been using it. And it's been permeating into our lives, maybe without us knowing as well. But it is the ability for computers to understand language, human language, in the same way that we do, and act on that human language in the same way that we do. So early things were hard coded in. Some of those, listen to certain word and do something. Now it's started to get more complex. And we've been using it. We've been seeing it. You've started to see it happen. Think back to a time, and you probably won't remember when it did happen, but all of a sudden when you started typing into Google, it started to finish the sentence, and it was almost like it was thinking it knew what you wanted to ask. You start typing in a few words, and then it would just give you a list of things that it thinks you want to ask, and generally one of them is probably right. And that's based on all sorts of things, your history, your cookies, all those sorts of things that you look for. But it's more natural language. Chatbots, when you go online now and it starts to ask you questions, for the first 10 minutes, you're generally talking to a chatbot. You're not talking to a human being. But it's talking to you. It's understanding your language. It's not understanding everything you say, but it's looking at key phrases, key words, and it's then picking out responses to that. And then even coming down to, we speak to computers now. We speak to our Alexa, Siri's, Google's. One in the corner there, my son speaks to the Google Home, and he has conversations about it with it for some of his homework, and he'll talk to it. So they're all sort of deep learning approaches to natural language processing. Another a few terms that we need to know as well. So there's around this AI, there's generative AI. That's becoming massive. That's the one that's kind of exploding at the moment, which is all around generating new content based on existing data, but generating new content, totally new content. We're seeing that in graphics, and show some of those in a little bit. Large language models, they generate text, but coherent text, and they're trained on sort of massive data sets, huge data. You got to think now, this thing's got the whole World Wide Web to go at to train itself. So it's now being trained on those, so large language models, and that's where we get into sort of things like ChatGPT and those sorts of things. A lot of tools now have got what we call co-pilots in them. They sit alongside you, and you can ask them questions. So Microsoft have now got a co-pilot. You can sit and you just ask it a question, like it's a colleague sat at the side of you, and you just ask them a question. So co-pilots are becoming a big thing, and I think they probably are going to be one of the things that's going to really take off. because it's like having an expert sat next to you. And then something else is prompts. We'll talk about prompts a little bit later, but prompt is how you ask the question. And that's on us, that's the human bit. And that's opening up a whole new field of prompt engineering. So there's a whole new sort of discipline opening up around prompt engineering about how we ask certain questions. But the big one that everybody knows about, because this was the one that sort of kicked off the mainstream, was ChatGPT. That's built on what we call a large language model, an LLM. And that's it describing itself. But it's a type of generative AI. And it can create original content. It's using data and then creating its own response, its own content. It uses deep learning. It's trained, or it's sort of data points to figure out what it should say. It's trained on vast amounts of parameters and information. And to give you a context, that's raising exponentially. If you look over here, and ChatGPT 2, and when that came out, it was, when we were developing that was trained on 1.5 billion. ChatGPT 3, which is the sort of one that we're looking at now, is trained on 175 billion. It's an exponential increase, which means that it's learning more and more. It's learning faster and faster and faster, and it's getting more refined. And now if we go into like GPT-4, it's even better. So what it does when it trains, it learns kind of structures and patterns and relationships between different things, in this case, different words and different phrases. And then it uses, in part, we call transformer models, which then predicts, well, you've used this word and this is the context and this is the phrase, therefore there's high probability that this word will come next, and then this word, and it will build up this phrase, and this is the phrase you're looking for. So it sort of sits generative AI and natural language sits here. You've got AI, machine learning, deep learning, and we've got natural language processing. When we're talking about some of the visual side, it sits here, but this generative AI sort of sits this very small subset on the Venn diagram there. And if you ask GPT, you can ask it, what's a quantity surveyor? And that's what it will spit out at you. And if you ask it, who was QSI? And it will spit this out. And it's sort of interesting, because if you start to look over, picks up a few similarities, different things. But one thing that jumped out at me when I generated these was, when I asked it different things about quantity surveying, it popped up this: play a crucial role, which I'm sure everybody on this call will say it is a crucial role. But where you find where that's come from, if you start to look, and I just did a quick straw poll, but you look at things like job adverts for quantity surveyors, or you look at courses for quantity surveyors and various other things, what you'll generally always find is within any of those adverts or marketing material for courses or for degrees, they talk about quantity survey playing a crucial role. It's very often in the text, and that's where it's sort of started to pick that up from, because now it's making an association of quantity survey a crucial role. And like I say, I don't think there's anybody on this call who disagrees with that. We can now generate specific GPTs. So, and I'll give you the link to the guy who's developed this, because he's doing a huge amount of work in sort of AI for our sector, for the construction sector. But there is now a specific GPT for AEC sector. And what that does, you can ask it questions, and it starts. You can ask it, well, I'm doing this piece of work. What's the best AI tool that I could use to help me with this piece of work? And it will start to then have a conversation with you and tell you what potentially some of the best tools are, how you might be able to best use them. So when we're now getting this, we had ChatGPT and large language models, which are very sort of overarching generic, but they've now opened it up so that you can generate your own. So you can have company specific GPTs. So rather than having to ask somebody all the time, well, how do I do this? Or if you have new starters and how do I do this? There's a GPT, there's a co-pilot, there's something there you can talk to that will help it. And I think that's really interesting. In terms of the sector, it's look at any of the reports that are coming out, any of the statistics, any of the research that's coming out, and it's on a huge growth curve. But in the next sort of 5-6 years, it's on a huge growth curve. Globally, the market is set to expand in terms of new tools, and you see that the new technologies, the new software, the new things are coming out all the time. I sort of like this meme that came out because it's almost like, we're accumulating all this knowledge, and well, it's just sitting there going, yeah, I can handle that. I can handle that quicker. I can read things quicker. I can produce things quicker. The bottom line is, though, it's us who've created, it's human beings who created the original data that it's working from. And if you took that away, then that's when you start to get into the whole sort of interesting part of could it do that without any information to work with? But that's when you start getting really philosophical about these things. So that's just a little bit of background, and putting a bit of context on some of these things. Now, in terms of where we are as a sector, as a construction industry, it's now becoming this almost ubiquitous thing, but it's fitting into these sort of subdivision elements for us. So there's design elements, visualization, some things for automation, project management. And if you ask ChatGPT, where is AI used in construction? How is it used? This is what it tells you. This is how it says, it's going to be used to improve design visualization. It's going to be used to optimize building. It's going to help us make better decisions. So even then, you ask it itself, and this is the sort of things that it tells you. This is where I'm going to work for you. This is where I'm going to, add some value to you. But look at that sort of design phase early on. And this is where a lot of the generative AI came in. And I first came across this. I won't play the video. The slides will be, Suzanne will send the slide decks around so you can click on the link and take a look at them. But this example, I first came across this example and concept of generative AI, and it was very, very early sort of stages. And it was back at the Autodesk University in 2015. I was over in the States, and what they were talking about was this project, which was for Airbus, and they were talking about optimizing and remanufacturing bulkheads in aircraft. And these things have just been solid panels in the past, but they got the generative design algorithms to redesign it. And they said, when you redesign it, we want to minimize weight, minimize materials. And they worked that through as an example, and it sort of came up with this. There was a couple more examples. There was one with the motorbike, where they asked it to, so these are the stresses and strains on the motorbike, but can you redesign the frame for us and optimize it for materials and optimize it for weight reduction? And so this example, it sort of redesigned it so it was structurally sound, but it used a hell of a lot less material, which gave this kind of quite odd-looking design. But it optimized it. The computer generated it. It was generative design. It went through thousands and thousands of solutions to get to this. And these guys worked that through, and this it's reduced the weight by this much, which is therefore means on all airplanes the weight is reduced, which reduces the fuel, which then reduces costs and reduces carbon emissions. And it kind of when you worked it through as a full solution to full problem, it was like, wow, that's that one arguably relatively small piece of an aircraft has made a massive difference. So that was sort of Autodesk. We're working on that. We're nearly 10 years ago in there. Where we've got to now, we've started to do more. We've got things like evolving or adaptive plans. So as you change it, it regenerates, and it's based on different sort of rules underneath it that changes. You change the size of the apartment, and it adapts the plan for it, or some work that architectural practices and Hadid were working on this sort of thing, so you can start to then optimize layouts. Quite interesting. A lot of the time when you see how these generative solutions evolve, they very much follow nature. It tells you sort of a lot about how nature evolved. It's mirroring that. You had some wacky ones where it's kind of redesigned the Golden Gate Bridge in generative design as well. So there's lots of examples out there, and there's also lots of tools out there now, and some of the big ones for things like visuals. Midjourney is one of the big ones. We've now getting tools that plug into our BIM software packages as well. We've got things like TestFit and Hypar, which you give it certain constraints and it will redesign for you. I'll show you an example of that on the next slide. Forma as well. There's another Autodesk tool that's out, and you can access that online. So there's lots of these, and if we look at this one, this is one of my colleagues at the university who's in our digital construction research group, Nigel Moore, and he's been doing some work with architectural practices looking at this. But essentially, we have a plot of land, and we know sort of certain apartment sizes, and we can then, what it's doing is you move this around, and you sort of pull the boundaries of things around. It optimizes the design. It redesigns on the fly for you, and we're using that now a lot with in sort of terms of education, in terms of our students. We're using that a lot from our design students, because we're saying, well, you're going to be able to come up with thousands of different sort of potential solutions just by using this tool. And you can see as it moves around the boundaries and reduces it, it's then recalculating the optimum number of apartments and different types of apartments that you can have on a certain site boundary, and that's using this TestFit, which is online and you can get access to. So just a word when we talk about some of this this generative work, we need to talk about prompting. And a prompt is what we ask the computer to do, what we ask the AI to do. It's how we talk to it. Not magical writing, in terms of asking. We're not writing some new thing, but it's engineered. And we're coming around some standard methodologies for doing that. One of my PhD students, some of the work I'll show you in a minute, but she's sort of looking at all these different approaches to prompt to ask the question. But RTRI is one, so we're asking it to act as, because if you tell it to act as, if you ask even GPT to act as somebody, or give me the answer to this from the point of view of somebody, it will contextualize it. And we ask it what you want to do. We ask it what the requirements are, what it needs to sort of be at the end, and we say, how do we want it to act? What do we want it to do? There's no point in. It becomes quite difficult sometimes because you want to write a prompt as if it's human, and we get very verbose sometimes in how we're talking. But it just needs those key things. And in terms of prompting, in terms of visuals, we need to give it certain things. And the example down here, which is a generative AI solution, and we give it this kind of prompt. So we give it a description, an expression, some technical details, an aspect ratio for the image, photograph. And there's lots of these now. There's been lots of research going on, and there's sort of people are now publishing different articles about how we better optimize these prompts and how we should structure them. And that's this whole prompt engineering. It's becoming a new field. And we're doing a little bit of work on this. One of my PhD students are doing some just kind of mind-blowing work, really. Hord Osland's doing some work on this. And she's looking at this from a historic point of view, and heritage buildings, and looking at how we might be able to digitally recreate heritage buildings using descriptions, human descriptions of it. So it's not perfect at the moment. Some of the, we're taking photographs of what were original buildings, and then we're engineering prompts. And these are some of the generative images that are being produced automatically. And they're not, but you're never going to get perfect with it, but you can start to almost do like extractions of certain features that you can see are the same. And some of our work is looking at taking historic England descriptions from the listing registers and starting to turn those into phrases, into prompts, and see how it works. So we're getting some really interesting results from this, and we can start to see certain features are being picked up. A lot of the historic buildings we're looking at were sort of churches, so it's picking up some of those. And you can see it's picked up. It's never going to be a perfect representation of that. It isn't, but it's picking up key features in the architectural styles and the materials. So that's kind of an ongoing piece of research that we're looking at, but we've got kind of high hopes as to where that's moving to. And in terms of a co-pilot, there's links on there, and you can do a bit more deeper reading on this. But there was some work that was done by an architectural practice where they used GPT to ask questions about the design as it was going on. So it didn't ask it to design it, but asked it questions about, well, okay, this is what we've got, and this is the size of the building, and this is the location. What sort of finishes should we be thinking of? And it would tell you, to go, okay, well, that's great. What about this? So it's like having somebody sat on your shoulder, really, that you can just ask questions to, and that evolves the design. And then things are getting sort of, from that design point of view, things are getting really interesting. There's all these tools now. ML is quite a cool one. You can do a quick sketch, put it in, start to talk, ask it about materials that would generate 3D content. Skybox starts to generate 3D scenes. Meshy is another one. You give it a prompt. This was one, I think I give it like an Edwardian detached 2-story building. Okay, not great, not perfect. It's got little weird things here, but stylistically, it's starting to pick it up, and it's generating 3D content. It's generating 3D models. But bear in mind where we are. This is really early days. But for us to start to generate that, I think is kind of scary. Or we've got things like Adobe Firefly for images, which is, you tell Adobe Photoshop what you want, and it redoes your image for you. If you haven't used that or looked at it or watched some of the sort of videos, I advise you to watch that. It's taking the whole thing we talk about, fake photographs. That was in the news recently, wasn't it? In the UK certainly, but that's opening the next level of what is real and what isn't real. There are a vast amount of applications coming out from a construction point of view, literally daily, coming out. And so I've just tried to pick a few up, and I'll give you some places to go and look as well. Like I say, if you go onto LinkedIn, it's like a daily challenge just to try and keep up with what's being delivered. But some of them, like some of the ones I think are kind of interesting, Immerso, which can analyze sort of what's been built against the 3D model and the design model, and it can do an analysis of that using AI and using some deep learning. There's Black Shark, which is more for bigger projects, for sort of geospatial data, and it can extract what kind of buildings there are, what kind of properties there are, and extract that data. There's tools for monitoring schedules against, you capture data about what's there, and it analyzes that against the plan of work and the schedules. It will start to tell you where things are on progress, behind progress. We can start to produce automatic drawings using sort of object recognition, and it then starts to draw kind of around them up there. So, fly drones over, and even with drones now, we've got, we do automated path. They will avoid objects, all those sorts of things. So, and that's all using AI. So we can do these automatic productions of lines. Computer vision is a big area. That's something I'm kind of interested in at the moment. I'm doing a little bit of work with that. Relatively simple, so it's Python programming, which is arguably relatively simple, but it can start to pick up and recognize there's people on site, there's plants. We can then use that to monitor if people aren't wearing the correct PPE, and this is just through basic cameras. It's not any kind of fancy cameras. It's basic cameras, but you trained it what PPE looks like, so it knows what people look like. You can train it what humans look like, and then you can train it if they're not wearing a hat, if they're not wearing a vest. So you can start to then monitor sort of PPE on site. There's other tools as well down here for things like tracking progress, so you can just sort of do a quick walk around and it will track that against where the progress should be. So you into like kind of 4D models. And then there's things to analyze sites. So from a geospatial point of view, it will look at a site. If you tell it what kind of sort of project you want to build on it, it will then analyze that and it will optimize and look at all other sites for you and tell you which one's going to be best. There's just a few of the interesting ones. There's so many. From a QSing point of view, the RICS early this year released a sort of a report, the impact it will have on AI. There's a couple of tools that are available, and I haven't used these in Anger, but I've sort of seen some of the demos of them. But things like Creo. So and a lot of this work is around a lot of focus around sort of takeoff and automating takeoff and automating quantities. But this one here, which is UK-based one, and this tool is looking about analysing tender documents. So analysing the documents to check everything's there, everything's correct. Is everything in the schedule there as well? So we're now getting to that contractual side. There's other tools coming out which are checking clauses and contracts as well, automated. So we've got to put this into context. We're at the precipice. It's going very fast. It's exponential, but we are at the early stages of this sort of thing. In terms of following forward and picking up sort of some of the what's happening next, and like I said, links on this, but there's an AEC AI hub run by this guy from Denmark, and it's amazing. That's kind of like it's a go-to place for looking at this. So I'd recommend that. And this guy, he's the guy who wrote the AEC AI GPT. But I'd sort of follow him if I were you. Follow him on LinkedIn if you want the updates. Unless you really suffer from the AI anxiety, because there's stuff every couple of times a day. But I would highly recommend his sort of social media feed and getting on that website as well, the AEC AI Hub, because it's a kind of a one-stop shop. Now, just something else I wanted to try and just show this for you, and let's just see if we can get this to work okay with the various things we've got. Let me just try this because I'm not sure with me having to change machines. Let me just see if I can get this to work okay, or if not, let me just try. Just give me 1 second, everybody. Sorry about this, but let me just try this and see if it works. I'm going to dump that for a minute. try. I'll put that on the sort of maybe in the chat or something like that. But this we're going down a bit of a rabbit hole now with AI as well. And I recorded. This was obviously the advert for this session, and I recorded that, and I've got like a voiceover on it. But when it's talking, and you can make your own judgment whether it sounds like me. You're obviously listening to me now, but the way I did it is I cloned my voice using AI, and I recloned my voice using this tool, online tool, 11 Labs. I took a snippet of me speaking in the last session that I did for QSI, which is about the scanning. It took about 2 minutes audio file of me speaking. I fed it into this. It then cloned my voice for me, and then whatever text I put in, it then speaks as if it's me talking. Now it's not perfect, but and I will drop the audio file into this as well. And it's not absolutely perfect. I played it for some guys at the office. I played it for my wife, and she's like, "Oh, it sounds like you. I can tell it's you, but there's a few little anomalies in it." The scary thing with it is when you clone it, you clone your voice. One, it sounds like you, but two, when it reads the sentence out, and it's a shame we can't hear it, but with some of the technical problems we got. But when it plays it, it even puts in little pauses like an or it even at one point here it slightly stumbles over the word and then goes back. It is incredibly realistic, and that's simple to do. And it's available. Whole range of ethical implications and discussions around that, but that's another area where we can. We get into that deep learning. It's looking for patterns in your voice, and it's recloning them. It's learning about them, how you say things, timbre, the color in your voice, the texture in how we speak, and it's recreating it. That's into a whole new world of scary, I think, but quite an interesting one, and something have a go at because it's kind of quite fun as well. So, just starting to wrap things up. In terms of things we need to consider, if you ask ChatGPT, what are some of the problems with AI in AEC? Let's ask the tool itself. It talks about a lack of creativity. Not quite sure I agree with that, but I think really what it's talking about is it's building on things that are already there. It's not plucking things out of thin air and creating them. It's actually taking cues from what's already been developed. Privacy, security. If I can clone my voice, and certain places have got voice recognition access. I can clone it. I clone that on about 2 minutes worth of sound. I can clone it on an hour worth of me talking, and it will keep getting better and better and better until it essentially will sound like me. There's some technical limitations in terms of some of the hardware and the software that we use. The big one, though, I think the big one is the ethical considerations around this, and we're contractual. The ethical considerations around this are massive for us. One thing that we need to be aware of: AI can hallucinate, and it can believe its own lies in some respects. So it can make things up, and it will pass them off as the absolute truth. And we're into that realm as well of kind of scary. Well, the computer said it must be true, but it can hallucinate. It is a known thing that AI can hallucinate. So it can make things up and kind of present them as very plausible facts. So something we need to really be aware of with that. So with all that in mind, and that is a very, very quick kind of whistle-stop tour, I guess with all that in mind is back to the first question: are we excited or afraid? We're probably somewhere in between. We're probably fascinated by what this thing is doing. I think anybody who doesn't have a healthy level of sort of not maybe not being afraid, but trepidation a healthy level of, certain level of trepidation, maybe where this is going. I think that's where we are at the moment. So thanks so much. Appreciate that. That was a whistle stop tour. Hopefully it's given a bit more information, a few things that maybe you didn't know. Please feel free, as always, to reach out to me. You can get me through sort of my socials or reach out to me at the university. I will, and Suzanne, I'll do the PDF of these so that these can go up on the portal as well. But quite happy. I'm conscious that it's about 5 to 8, or 5 to 9. So if anybody's got any quick questions, or if you want to email me, happy to sort of try and take anything now. Unless you're asking, if you ask a question, I'll be feverishly tapping into ChatGPT to get a response, and I'll let ChatGPT respond to you. I'm only joking. You're muted, Suzanne, I think.
Am I? Can you hear me? No.
Yes, we can hear you.
That's okay. Thank you. I thought I wasn't. Thank you, David. That, as you say, an absolutely vast subject, and yeah, it is scary, I have to say. I am very afraid of it. And I think, as you said at the beginning, it's the speed that you just can't keep up with it and understand what's going on, and the amount of choice that is out there. That, if you want something specific, you can spend hours and hours trying to find the product that you actually want. That's I think that's probably one of my big problems with it all.
Yeah, it is. It's the range, and it's the speed, because you could be using something this week, and then next week something's evolved from it and it's changed again. And that's the scary bit.
Yes, it is. It's a bit mad, really, isn't it? But we are where we are, and have to make the most of it.
It's not. The thing is, now it's not going to go away. It's not going to go away.
No,
it's here.
We have to embrace it.
We've got to find a way to coexist.
Thank you very much. It was really, really interesting. So, as always, if anyone has any questions, would like the slides, would like a CPD certificate, either a quick message in the chat now before you go off, or you can email me at any time and I can sort that out for you. Thank you all for attending. Next month, for our first Thursday, we're doing something slightly different, and we're having a session looking at academic publications and why they're important and how to create them, which will be a little foreign perhaps to many of us, but I think it will be an interesting subject. So details of that will be coming out very shortly. So again, huge thank you to David, giving us all lots to think about there, and thank you all for attending, and see you soon, hopefully. Bye.
Right.
Yes, thank you.
See you soon.
Suzanne.
Keith. All right.
I'm having terrible problems with the Wi-Fi here, and my daughter's just got up and done me a secure lock on the a hotspot on my phone. So in fact, the last 10 minutes I got. You've recorded this. Is it possible to have a copy of the recording, or where can I see the recording?
Bear with me 1 second.
Oh yeah, you're going to stop the recording.